Boxscore Geeks show, Brian, regularity. And by the way, to tie off the cliffhanger of last week's show or 2 weeks ago, I did go to Indiana. And Brian, I probably saw, I'm going to have to check the numbers, but one of the greatest game sixes in NBA history. And that is a hilariously true fact because I did a lot of looking up. This is the Box Score Geek Show where we are going to talk the NBA stats, everything you wanted to know about NBA Finals, free agency, and the draft. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, found most places, Nerd Numbers. With me, as always, is my producer, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster. Brian, were your nerves able to take the NBA Finals?
Yeah, it's easier when my team is not in the finals, but yeah, I mean, it was a great effort for Tyrese Halliburton until he went down and the Indiana Pacers, but it wasn't enough. It in the end it did go how everyone thought it would go, and Oklahoma City dominated and capped off their all-time best season. So, people will say maybe they could have done better in the playoffs, shut down the Pacers a little bit more. Maybe it's not as good as some of these postseason runs, but with that regular season, I think it's a great team. Now, can they keep all their guys together, Dre? We'll see how that goes.
I mean, so here's I have so much. So let's talk the meat of what we're going to discuss on the show and then what all we get to because so much has happened, Brian. That's what's nuts. Of course, we were going to talk the NBA Finals because, as I mentioned on 2 weeks ago show, when we determined that the Pacers were going to force a game six. Now, what was funny, very briefly, Brian, as I said, the Pacers are going to force a game six, and I could see OKC win. And there was this brief window where it was actually flipped, and I was like, "Am I going to see the Pacers win?" Because I want to say in Game Four, the Pacers were actually up, and we're almost going to take a 3-2 lead. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I might get to see the Pacers like win the NBA Finals in Game Six." Didn't end up happening. I thought I was gonna see OKC win, and it's kind of funny because I was like talking to my cousin who shout out to Patrick. Patrick's in general are fantastic basketball people. So not that Patrick. Patrick Minton, the creator of the Box Score Geeks, also a fantastic basketball fan. But my cousin Patrick took us to the game, like hosted us. So I paid the ticket, he hosted us, fair trade. And it was an amazing game. And I was like, hey, I'd really like to stick around and watch the finals MVP ceremony if that's okay. Like I was saying that before the game. I was like, I'm happy to be here. It's exciting to see this. It's probably over because for those that don't know, also Tyrese Halliburton was clearly injured in game five. So Tyrese Halliburton, who has been a monster playoff player, was up, and then like game five was just terrible. It's like, okay, it's probably over. So anyway, we're going to talk the NBA Finals, which, yeah, like I said, did go and see and had amazing experience. We're going to talk the blockbuster trade that is a. It's interesting, Brian, because I might think that Kevin Durant's past his prime. I might think that, hey, maybe it's not the player to go for Houston, but I think to spoil the teaser, I think you and I are both going to agree this is a good trade, regardless, which is, you're betting with house money. And then we might talk some NBA draft and other movements. So Brian, that is already meaty, but as I've kind of said every year, we're in the off season. Um, a lot of news is going to break early, and it's very tempting when it breaks early to just like, oh my God, we got to talk it all. And it's like, but this news is going to have to sustain us when things dry out, when things settle down.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know if we said this yet, but the NBA draft is going on right now, or rather just concluded. And we're probably not going to talk about it too much. There weren't really too many trades. Some exciting young players. So maybe we'll spend a few minutes on it, but that'll probably come throughout the offseason. Because, Dre, the best thing about the NBA for people like me whose team is not making a deep playoffs run, we have the California Classic and the Las Vegas Summer League right around the corner in just a few days. So That's when I'll
Well,
be
also,
catching up on these rookies.
you've been really digging the Valkyrie NBA Finals and talk everything. How historic it was. What do we call OKC at the end of this? Are they the greatest team of all time? And then some fun ABA stats. But fun fact, Brian, the night that the NBA Finals was going on, Game 6 that I got to see, I was hoping when I was in Indiana, this is just being greedy. I was like, hey, maybe if the Fever are around, I can catch a Fever game. They weren't, Brian, because they went and played the Golden State Valkyries. Now, I'm a
Yeah.
Caitlin Clark fan, no lie, but we've established that I am a Valkyries fan. I hope I still get to be what's her name? It's Valerie, last name on the Valkyries. I'll look it up in just a second. But I was like,
Oh,
I'm
you're
definitely
probably
about
saying Veronica Burton, right?
Veronica. Oh well,
Not Valerie.
I was thinking Valerie because of Valerie Valkyries, but Veronica Burton. Yeah, love Veronica Burton already.
Yeah.
Would love to get her in my
One of the
fantasy
top
league.
assisters now in the WNBA.
Interesting,
Yeah.
and she's a forward, right? So,
No, she's
and
a
I need
point guard. She's a point guard.
point. Okay,
Yep.
this is going to blow my mind because
The forward you're
she
thinking
just
of is Kayla. I forget her last name now, but the announcers really want her to go to the All Star game as a forward.
Thornton. Yeah,
Kayla
Kayla
Thornton.
Thornton.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. She
6'1"
played for
Thor
the Liberty last year. Yeah.
Oh, and interest. Okay, so oh man, Brian, I love this even more because Veronica went to Northwestern, which is right by where the Fever were playing, or
Yeah.
where the Pacers were playing. So heck, or no, that's in Chicago. So anyway, Brian, there's way too much going on. I drove by Northwestern, which is in Chicago, on the way to see the Pacers play
You might be
and
thinking
the
Purdue
Fever.
is in Indiana, I think.
Purdue is in Indiana.
Yeah.
The Fever were out in Golden State, and then so the Valkyries beat the Fever, while the Pacers beat the Thunder, and Northwestern, which is where a star on the Valkyries plays, is in Chicago, which I drove by. Boom, full circle, Brian. All right, let's see if I can untangle that and get back to the NBA Finals. What is remarkable about the NBA Finals to me is, of course, the Cinderella run of the Pacers, because the Pacers and the Nuggets, not to be mean, didn't have any business being there. Now, you were nice last show in pointing out that the Denver Nuggets, especially with the kind of boost for health, were a marginal contender worthy team. And by that, what we mean is when we typically look at teams that have won an NBA finals, they have to be so strong with at least a star player. And the Nuggets might have been a little below that threshold with 3.9 SRS. That's how much they would outscore an average opponent on a normal court by a metric over at Basketball Reference. That simple rating system. SRS. The Nuggets were 3.9. Normally contenders are like at least a 5, and that's the tail end. Because for perspective, the Thunder were above a 12, and that's the first time we have ever, ever, ever seen this. So the Nuggets were like contender worthy, especially if you thought that Jamal Murray, that Michael Porter Jr., that Aaron Gordon, that heck, even Nikola Jokic had injury in the regular season and managed to get healthy and gel come playoff time. So they might have been closer to a 6. And I might run the numbers at some point to verify that. But still, 6 versus 12 isn't supposed to happen. And the Nuggets and the Pacers had the same story, which is like laid it all on the line, took it to game 7, and then in game 7 it's over. Although, Brian, what I do really want to say about the Pacers as just a mad sign of respect is I I think it was so much closer, and you and I were watching the game at the same time, talking back and forth, and you're usually right on takes like this, Brian. I love your prognostication, but you were just like, I don't know if OKC has enough in the tank. And what's funny enough, or what Indiana has enough in the
Yeah.
tank to take OKC. OKC had too much in the tank. That was the problem.
Because they're at this point in the game, Dre, they're making a run after Halliburton was hurt, but they're starting to look really tired to me.
Yeah, so what happened is the Pacers go up by one into the half in the NBA Finals, and you're like, oh my goodness, can they do it? And I was viewing this as a chess game, which is kind of funny because if for those that might not do this, if you go watch chess live nowadays, there's a little bar that looks just like the win-loss percentage that you see in traditional football and basketball games now. So we see these all over the place now, right? These little charts that are like which team is winning by much and who's supposed to win, except chess is perfect. Chess knows for a fact who is winning or who's losing. Basketball, whatever, we might not be privy to everything. But the Pacers and the Thunder were just going back and forth. And there is this very narrow window in the third quarter where the Thunder get a steal and score a three. And then on the next play, the Pacers try and force a play and the Thunder get a steal and make another three. And then I want to say the Pacers miss their next shot. The Thunder get a rebound. I want to say at some point in here, I'm not sure if it's on the steal and three or on their next one, but they also, the Thunder, I want to say, missed a shot, get it back and turn it into a three. And it was this like brief lapse, right? Like the Thunder get two steals and I want to say an offensive rebound in this very short window. I can verify it too. I'll look that up. And like that was the game. And it reminded me so much of chess because if you're a boring person like me that watches chess, the game will be even. This bar will be at 500 at zero. And then sometimes one person makes a mistake that is monumentous and it's over. And if you look at that game, there is this 9 point dip. And from that point, the Pacers can never recover. And if you watch at the dip, they do manage to like come back and get to -9 a couple times, right? Like they do manage to get back to playing, I'd put in quotes like blow for blow basketball, but they can't get out. And that -9 also knocks them because that means they had to play aggressive in the fourth. And the next thing we're going to talk about is like being out of gas. Like they just did not have enough left to be able to compete with the Thunder at that point.
Yeah, it's when you're at that point in the season, you're against a team that's a lot better than you, and you have injured players, and you're down. If there's you have all these things against you, right? It's almost you have to play perfect for the whole game almost. And they were able to for a while, in the middle of the game, like you were saying. But yeah, after a while, they just collapse under the weight of this better team.
And it's another thing about that I think is really key, where you were saying collapse under the weight. So this run in the first half, which I loved because it was done by TJ McConnell. I want to give shout outs. This needs to be an award category we do at some point, Brian, when we get more time, right? I want to give Alex Caruso and TJ McConnell the wins produced or the wages of wins like what the hell player award, as in Alex Caruso. Oh, Brian, there's another funny story here. We'll use Alex Caruso to briefly talk on that. We'll probably revisit it. So I'm going to use Alex Caruso as a Wages of Wins award player, the what the heck were they thinking player, because Alex Caruso, of course, left the Los Angeles Lakers. And the reason he left the Los Angeles Lakers is after Jerry Buss died, his family inherited the team. And that's a problem because it's a pizza problem. Too many people making too many decisions. And it's also a problem because many of the people in the Buss family, their fortune is in the Lakers. So for Steve Ballmer, as an example, Steve Ballmer is the exec of the Clippers, of course, from Microsoft money. Steve Ballmer does not care about how much the Lakers payroll goes because that's not where he gets his money. There were some people in the Buss family that had it. And another big story, all of this stuff's happening at once, right, Brian, is the Lakers sold, like Jeannie Buss sold like the controlling interest. I think the Lakers valued at 10 billion. Holy cow. So
Yeah,
what's the new owner going
the
to do?
family kept something like 15 or 16% of it, and they sold all the rest to the previous minority owner, who is the majority owner of the Dodgers ownership group. And if you're not a baseball fan, the Dodgers are known over the past, 5 to 10 years since that ownership group took over from being a laughing stock that has now invested all kinds of money into their farm system and are just they have the best player in baseball and Shohei. They're like now a model franchise. So Lakers fans, I'm assuming like Chris, are hoping this, Dodgers ownership group is going to be able to put in a lot of money and professionalism and organization to this former, family business.
Do you know if Magic Johnson's any part of that? Because I know he
Oh,
was
that's
part
a
of the
good
Dodgers,
question.
but
He was part of the, yeah, he must be. I'm not sure. I'm
well,
not
it's
sure.
possible because I think he's so I mean that's
Oh
the
no,
other thing
wasn't he
is
part of the McCourt group before that sold it to this new group?
yeah, because I think he like bought the Dodgers, so I mean he's
Yeah.
made money on it. So I mean it'd be cool. It doesn't matter one way or the other, but I guess just the big point there, right, is there was this period of time where the Lakers did have really good players and let good players out the door needlessly. Caruso, that was such a hilarious story where at the time, I guess they went up and said, "Hey, Caruso, do you want to take a pay cut?" And he was like, "No, what are you talking about? You're the Lakers." And so he goes to OKC for not much, if I recall, right? I'm gonna look this
He
up
went to
in
the
real time.
Bulls before he went to OKC, didn't he? Or did he
Okay,
go to OKC twice? I'm not sure. But
I
I know
think
he was
you're
on the
that.
Bulls directly before he was traded to OKC.
All right, so let's watch this walk. So he signs at the Lakers, and he's on the Lakers at less than the minimum. Finishes his time on the Lakers at 2.75 million. He leaves the Lakers as a free agent to go to the Chicago Bulls for 8.6. It is really hard to put that in normal terms because you and I come from the era where like 50 million was a big deal. But nowadays in the modern NBA, 8 million is basically, I want to say, like the mid-level exception amount. So he goes to the Bulls, and then he is traded by the Bulls to the Thunder for Josh Giddey. And I loved that trade. I didn't think that was a horrible trade on either side because I thought Giddey was a young player that showed some upside, but the Thunder needed like established veterans. And Caruso is that veteran, and like Caruso's that person that can come off the bench and no ego and like kind of exactly what you need. And I mean, it seems like to that point, Giddey, oh yeah, so this is like perfect. So like Giddey is 12 wins on Chicago, star level play. So like you're like, oh no, what did they let out the door? Caruso though is almost the same per minute, plays less, and kind of your kind of sardonic comment at the start is like, is OKC gonna have to blow this up? I think they recognize that as going, hey, if we sign Giddey, that's redundant, right? We've got this guard forward, and we got Shea, and we got Jalen. So it's like if we sign Giddey, Giddey's going to demand a pay raise because his contract's up next year, his rookie contract, so he's going to get that boost. So this is very, very similar to James Harden, but unlike James Harden, they kind of did it at the right time. They didn't do it when they were about to like take off, and they did it for someone more established because James Harden was traded for Steve Adams. Steve Adams turned into a great player, but you didn't know. Whereas the Thunder just said, we're going to trade to an established veteran that's underrated, and we're going to be able to like underpay forever, right? He's only 30 years old and yeah, he is signed. This is ridiculous, Brian. Caruso is signed with the Thunder through 2029, and he maxes at 22 million in 2029. I guarantee you that Giddey on his next contract is going to might make more in 1 year than Caruso makes in 3 years of this contract.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. I mean, I did think about, you know, the match, right? In that, yeah, Giddy wants to be a point guard. He needs to have the ball in his hands on offense to be most effective. You have Shea, it makes sense. But Caruso being locked up for long, that's so awesome. They got Hartenstein as well, right? And he started for quite a bit of the year, especially when Chet was healthy or hurt, even when he was healthy. And those two guys are what put them over the top, right? They were the number one seed last year, but they lost during the playoffs. They don't stand pat. They upgrade the roster with these two veteran defenders, and that's what did it. They were even better this year. Um, Breaking news though, for in Lakers white guy news, Austin Reeves has turned down a maximum contract from the Lakers, a maximum rookie contract. He wants to get another year of service under his belt and test free agency next year instead. So, I mean, he's a better player than some rookies that have gotten, the rookie max, like Jordan Poole. We're going to talk about him, but I'm not sure about this move. I'm, a little bit risk adverse. If I were him, I might want to bank that money and not risk injury. But yeah, the Lakers got
It's
the
it's
cold shoulder
it's
today, Dre.
it's not a bad. Well, first, okay, so let's look at a few things there. So if we're talking like underrated white guys, let's finish up the final. So, right, Caruso just gets shown the door needlessly by the Lakers because they ask him to take a pay cut. He's no. And now the Thunder are just gonna laugh forever, going, we have this underrated player. It's like, at some point you could legitimately say, oh my goodness, they could have had Giddy. And they're like, if we had had Giddy, we might have had to blow everything up. Caruso, we can stay like Caruso and Chet are such a cheat code. They have Caruso and Chet who are going to be combined making what, less than 40 million? That's two starters
Well, so
that
that's
are
the big deal.
undervalued.
Chet and Jalen Williams are both getting extended this summer. They're going to be
Uh,
making big
well,
maxes.
so that's one more year, right? So they should have one more because Chet was injured as a rookie. He was a sophomore, right?
So
So
they're both from the same draft. They're both under contract next year, but it's the extension eligible year. They don't want to be lame ducks. They want to come into this year with a contract or they want to be traded. They just won the finals. They don't want to be traded, right? So
and actually, let me look at that. But I mean, so here's the thing. That's still, if I'm not mistaken, just to
I can bring it up
hopefully be
here.
clear on it.
The
I,
good
I
old
think you're right.
spa track.
But what I'm saying is, if I'm not wrong, he will still have his Chet will still have his 2026 pay, which is nothing. So there is still,
Yeah, that's a
you're
fair
right. He
point.
can get that Matt's extension, but he'll still have that 2 years of pay. And we had actually discussed this back in the day. I want to say for Jordan Poole with the Warriors. I am so angry the Warriors got to prove me right. Very few teams do. And by that, what I mean, Brian, is I hate when teams make what seems like a bad move, and then you go, but they're setting themselves up for a good move because normally they're not. And so there was a point where the Warriors maxed Jordan Poole, and I was like, what the hell are you doing? And they let, I want to say, like Andre Iguodala walk, right? And when we looked at it, though, it
That
goes
was
like this.
that was related to bringing in a guy also from the Lakers whose name I'm forgetting now, D'Angelo Russell. They
Yeah, but
traded for they did a sign and trade for D'Angelo Russell from the Nets and sent Kevin Durant there in a sign and trade, and they were over the salary cap, so they basically dumped Andre Iguodala along with the first round draft pick
oh,
for
okay,
nothing.
actually, Brian, I got
That's
I
how it
got the
went down.
wrong player,
Yeah.
but he wound up back anyway, so it's fine. Gary Payton. It was Gary
Okay.
Payton they let.
Okay.
And I went, what? And the easy answer is you go, what the hell are you doing? You're extending Poole and you're letting Payton walk. And the answer is Poole is still on his rookie contract. We can promise him 30 million next year, and that's not going to hit us this year. Gary Payton's asking for 8 million this year. That is because, for those that, this is the fun part that everybody loves, right, Brian, is the NBA has changed the rules such that not, if you're over the salary cap, the NBA is a soft capped league, meaning that you in theory you're only allowed to spend a certain amount, but if you go over it, it's not you're penalized, it's you're allowed to go over it and you have to pay more. So it's not like they say you're not allowed to go over the number. It's soft cap. You're allowed to go over it, but you pay a penalty. And the longer you're over it, it's kind of, this feels like some hilarious, boring computer game or something, right, Brian? Where like the longer you're in the danger zone, the more damage you start taking.
The
So
repeater
that
tax,
is
yeah.
the repeater tax. So that was the problem is Gary Payton, they're like, hey, if we give Gary Payton 8 million this year, we jump into that repeater danger territory. It really, really hurts. we can promise Jordan Poole whatever we want and it doesn't hit us this year. Chet's like that. So if next year Chet and Jalen Williams both go show me the money, hey, guess what, Brian? That's fine because they don't see the money until 2027. So this year, 2026, Chet, Caruso, and Jalen are nothing in terms of pay to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And even if Chet and Jalen get those max extensions, the Thunder are still in a great spot because they have all these assets where if they need to, they can bundle one or both of them away, or if they just keep winning titles, they don't care. So we'll have to see what happens. And that's related back in the day to like the Warriors did this thing too, where they basically said, "Hey, we can offer a max extension to someone and use that in the future, and it won't hit us this year." And that's actually what the Lakers just tried to do with Austin Reeves. So I view that as a positive sign. Austin Reeves isn't what I would love to max, but he's above average. He's young. He's improving. So that's the right type of move. And Austin Reeves saying, "Hey, I'm not interested. I want to wait and see." Here's the other thing that's key. Very similar situation this happened with was Jalen Brunson. Except, so Jalen Brunson with the Mavericks offered him an extension, but it was like 55 million. And he's like, I want to see what my value is. And he goes off in the playoffs and shocker, his value was quite high. And then at that point, the Mavericks like, you're right, you're worth it. We'll give you your money. And he's like, I don't want your money. I'm going to New York. By the way, Jalen's in general, Brian. Correct call, right call. Now we go back to like the Lakers. They offered him a max. Austin Reeves, like, I want to see what I can do. If Austin Reeves goes off and is worth the max, if the Lakers go back to him and say, we would like to give you the max, he's going to say, yeah, you did. You offered that already. That's awesome. You believed in me and I proved it. But if they had tried to lowball him like the Lakers did with Alex Caruso, and that happens, then he's just out the door. So I'm okay with it. You know, wages of wins people have sometimes called players overpaid. I've done this with like Kristaps Porzingis. You know, I'm going to agree there where I'm just going to say, you know, I don't necessarily think he is worth that money, Austin Reeves, but I'm fine with it because you're on a team now. You're on a team with Luka Doncic. Learn from the Mavericks. Do not let good players out the door unless they are immediately replaced. If you have a player like Luke, that's the rule. That's the rule, Brian. Like the rule I finally crystallized. If you have a star player, you are not allowed to let any above average player out the door if you do not have a commensurate value back in. So the Thunder, as an example, going all the way back to that, they let Giddy out the door, but they had Caruso right there. So they didn't trade Giddy for future picks to save money. They traded Giddy to save money, but they got Caruso immediately.
Yeah, and the example that we've been talking about lately is the Celtics, right? They had all these good point guards. Brogdon, a little bit hurt, Marcus Smart, kind of the same thing. And they're like, yeah, we got Derek White. We don't need these guys. They can go. So yeah, interest, and we're gonna talk about the Celtics more in a little bit. I think what they're probably looking at doing is they probably have to trade Hartenstein or in some way because he's making 28 next year. That's the end of his deal. And even if they extend him, he's still going to have that number, I think. So he's probably
You
the guy that's going.
know, you know where he'd be really good, Brian.
How about the Warriors?
Well, okay, look, yeah, the Warrior. Everybody should go to the Warrior. We agree.
But you're saying
Where
in
I think he'd
general.
be,
Okay.
I think the Pacers. I
Okay.
Because if you look at the Pacers, what was baffling about them in the finals even kind of validated this. Was Miles Turner. Now, he might be a defensive specialist. It's like, here's a problem. We look at Dort for the Thunder and Miles Turner for the Pacers. And you can come to me and say they're defensive specialists. And I'm fine agreeing on both. You and I agree on Dort, where we're like, does too much on defense to hurt. But here's the thing. If you look at Dort's raw box score numbers, Dort is an average to above average player that then if I give him the benefit of the doubt of being a defensive specialist, I'm like, you're worth it. And if I recall, Dort's not bad if I recall on salary. And
No, in
Miles
fact, he's in the
Turner,
same boat. He's in the same boat as those other guys, as Holmgren and both Williams. Kenrich Williams is also in that boat as well. All four of those guys are extension eligible. So yeah, the OKC is going to be looking to do that this summer.
20, I mean, next year though, that's the thing is like this team is loaded going into next year. And what is fascinating and mean to me is I really think they have the potential, if they are wise, to bundle a couple of these players together and upgrade because I'm going to use Caruso as an example. I'm going to use Shea as an example. The Thunder know how to go for undervalued players. So I mean, God, Brian, like you could see the Thunder if Doncic hadn't gone to the Lakers, where if the Lakers are doing it right, he's never going anywhere. Um, I could see the Thunder doing something right, like turning Hartenstein and Jalen or Dort, and yeah, some combination into Doncic. I'm I'm really excited to see what the Thunder do. I really hope they don't disappoint. I have a possible related thing, and I do. By the way, Brian, you got on the same track because I was talking about how the hell did that player get let out the door? That led us perfectly into white guys on the Lakers. Let's go back to how the hell they let them out the door. But this could also be white guys on the Lakers at some point. TJ McConnell, Brian, the other what the hell
Mm.
guy. TJ McConnell was just let go by the 76ers. Now, this is post Hinkie. But I love TJ McConnell because TJ McConnell was the Ben Simmons salary, or it was the Ben Simmons mortgage insurance, if you want to call it that, which is we love Ben Simmons as a number one pick. He had some injury concerns, but it's like it doesn't matter because you have TJ McConnell, and if he gets injured, TJ McConnell can come in. And in fact, in the NBA Finals, TJ McConnell did just that, and we'll go back to talking that in a second. TJ McConnell walked into the Pacers for 3 million a year. The 76ers, after Hinkie, with the Colangelos, right? They just let TJ McConnell out the door, and he was a huge part of the NBA Finals. So, could end up on the Lakers, right? If Austin Reeves does want to come back, see if they can get McConnell to come over. Although I think the Pacers are a little too savvy for that. But yeah, Brian, a lot of fun stuff there. And I did manage to finally track back in the NBA Finals what I was talking about. And this is rough. And it was McConnell, in fact, in the middle of the third. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander gets a three. TJ McConnell gives up a steal on the next play. Chet Holmgren gets a three. Because, of course, Brian, we're going to talk Chet a lot more in just a second. Of course, Chet gets a three. And then TJ McConnell gives up another steal. And then then Shea gets another three. So, like, I argued from a chess perspective, that was the blunder. Those two steals that McConnell gave up after, like, Shea hit a three. Of course, Shea was going to hit a three, right? He's just that good. This is what you were saying. Like, some people were asking, can he shoot? He was having a bad shooting night. I'm going to argue that was defense. The Pacers' defense was phenomenal. Um, but he makes that three. McConnell gets a little jumpy. They get a steal. McConnell tries to force it again. They get another steal, and that's what gets them ahead. So it's rough because McConnell, when Tyrese Halliburton went down, was why they were able to stick around. But he just didn't have enough. And the other scary thing, Brian, that you and I were actually talking about real time in the game is McConnell in the first half just takes it to Chet, right? Like, and this is classic NBA. The veteran experience against the young new player that can't keep up. In the second half, though, Brian, Chet was locking down TJ McConnell. Chet Holmgren, a center, was locking down TJ McConnell, a point guard. And Chet, I think how many he got multiple blocks in that last game. He was just, it's absolutely ridiculous that Chet Holmgren, like in the last game, very last game, gets 18 points, 5 blocks, 8 rebounds in the final game in the NBA Finals. And of course, it's like it's a non-story because Shea's getting Finals MVP with multiple stuff. It's just The Thunder have that. The Thunder have that on a rookie contract. They have a center that can defend point guards and get massive blocks. And that's exactly what you were saying when we were talking back and forth. You're just like, the Pacers do not have enough in the tank and do not have enough ammo left because they lost Tyrese. They were out of scoring options. They were able to change up the strategy. I'd be really curious your opinion. Was that Carlisle in your opinion? Like Carlisle does seem like a savvy coach.
Yeah, I think he's got an okay reputation. It depends who you talk to, I think, but I think he's mostly got a good reputation.
Yeah, it was really weird what happened with him in Dallas, but we talked this last week, and I think the reality with coaches is a Larry Bird point. Larry Bird, front office of the Indiana Pacers, is coaches have a shelf life because the NBA is not built for persistent teams, which is in some ways good by what you're saying about Oklahoma, where they keep mixing it up. They're not staying still because you can't. Because if you stay still, the players get sick of each other. They tune out the coach. The rest of the league catches on to you. But yeah, so the Pacers did a good job mixing up strategies, but I called the Thunder the Borg, where it's just like it didn't work. You could catch them once, and then a quarter later they were on to you.
Yeah, and you're talking about rookies versus veterans just a little bit ago. And McConnell is that veteran, but he still had 7 turnovers in that game versus the OKC defense. Like that defense, I think, is the real story of the team and why they are so historic.
And I got to give hats off credit to both teams. Game six that I got to watch that admittedly finally broke the Pacers' way. So the first quarter was like close, and then it was close in this like it was close after the first, and then after the second, the Pacers were up, or yeah, at the half the Pacers were up 20. At the end of three, the Pacers were up 30. Both teams were just so good at defense, and the very noob take I had was I have a bird's eye view, and I like to think of myself as having pretty decent spatial analysis. I like things like chess and whatever, right? So from a bird's eye view, it's usually easy to watch the lines where the open passes are, where the players are. Advantage I have most NBA players don't is I can see behind them, right? So, on a fast break, I can see how much time they have. And what I'll say is there was very little time for either team to do anything. And that was just the speed of both the Thunder and the Pacers to reset was ridiculous. The number of times there was a fast break by one team, and you and I, Brian, are probably used to like old school NBA jam days, right? Like you get a fast break, that's just 2 points. And the speed of Pascal running up the court to catch up or the teams to get reset, it was just like this has to be very similar to chess, which I keep coming up with, where you look at just the competition of chess players nowadays versus even 20 or 30 years ago. NBA is the same way. To the people that are going, teams these days don't play defense. My rejoinder is it's going, the amount of time you have in a modern game when you get that advantage, right? When you do the pick and roll, when you do a switch, when you get a player open, is so much smaller than it used to be. We watch games from the 90s, and I just remember there would be times where it was painful, right? Where there's a guy open at three, and you just watch, and you could like pull out a stopwatch, and you're like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there would be points where a person would get open from three, and they'd have 1 second, and if they didn't have it in that 1 second, they were covered. It's you know that's not true of the entire NBA, but I will say the Pacers and the Thunder for this series, the defense was just amazing. And it was amazing in that it was enjoyable to watch. Because for any fan of the NBA, pick up a random 90s game and sound mean, Brian, I'll do it though. It's like watching kids soccer sometimes, where like a guy dribbles up the court and just chucks up a bad mid-range jumper and the other team rebounds it and they dribble up the court and shoot a mid-range jumper. And like if you ever watch soccer, it's just like a bunch of kids running that way and then this way. Whereas this one, it's right. The Thunder are running hard. and the Pacers are locking them up and they're switching and the Pacers are catching and you're like, oh, Shea's open from three and nope, Pascal's running right at his face. It's just, it was enjoyable to watch because I was just sitting there like I was waiting. I was waiting for those moments where I was going to be depressed because a player was left wide open from three. I'll say this kind of meanly, Brian, as a Nuggets fan, that's what I grew up with and have gotten used to. You watch Nuggets games, the Nuggets have some amazing offense, but there's so many times on defense where you're just like, hey, there's a guy right there. Someone should probably guard him. Oh, no. Oh, he made a three. All right, cool. I'm used to that. And in this series, Thunder Pacers, there wasn't that. And that was just like the most impressive thing to me because I kept waiting for those moments.
Yeah, and that's, well, I guess the first overall point is, to me, if you're somebody that hasn't, if you're younger or for whatever reason you haven't been to a lot of pro sports events, that's the biggest difference versus TV is the speed when you're up close. You can see how athletic these players are, and it's a huge difference, right? When you're have that bird's eye view on the camera, it's not quite the same. That being said, your point is correct though. It's so funny to me where we have all these players, former players who are now analysts, and this is something we talk about all the time on the show and is a very popular topic on social media. Why does the NBA hire a bunch of analysts that don't like the league and badmouth it so much? For some reason, that's just the way it is. And that badmouthing goes like this: these players are soft these days. There's so much load management. Why don't they play 40 plus minutes a game every game like we did? And you hit it on the head, Dre. The quality of play is so much worse back then. They're walking up the ball for the whole fourth quarter. The pace is slower. I mean, even if you go back to the 80s when they had a reasonable pace, yeah, it's a much worse quality of play. Not as tight, players being guarded, like you said. We don't have the player tracking data, but watching old NBA footage is jarring. There's no doubt it's much worse play.
Now, I think we had kind of had this to talk because I wanted to hear your take on this too in regards to quality of play and that comment you said about old players, why don't they just play 40 in the quality of play? Because here we're in a fascinating dichotomy between a lot of players. I'm going to talk Tyrese Halliburton's injury. So recently, Luka Doncic, right, leaves the Mavericks, and when he leaves, the I don't know if it was intentional, but it felt like it. The way to try and get in front of that story was Luka Doncic has a bad attitude. And part of that, of course, was that Luka Doncic had been out injured, and it's like, oh, is he soft or whatever? Now, we have had multiple players that have gotten injured, have rushed back from injury, and this just happened with Tyrese, rushed back from like a clearly a bad strain, and injures his Achilles in Game 7, and it is painful because the last thing Tyrese did positively was with 7 minutes left to go in the first, he makes a three to put the Pacers up 14-10. They're actually tied, and then Tyrese his leg like buckles, it pops, and he falls over and he gives up the ball. And the like, it's so annoyingly indicative of what happens because that play happens, and that's the play that puts up OKC for the like that's the first play of the game to give them the lead, and then Tyrese exits the game, and that's all she wrote. And you and I were talking back and forth about this thing too of just players that risk these injuries by coming back. And it is so hard as a fan to know what's going on because is there any way the doctors on the Pacers said, we don't think you should play? And Tyrese went, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. So I think what he was told is when he got the injury in game 5 is this is a 2-week minimum injury. That's what the doctors told him. And of course, he came back and played game 6. Played pretty well in game 6, didn't re-injure it. So that's
Can I
kind of
ask you a
what.
question on Game 6, just on the brief? Did you see like some of the highlights? To end the first half, he does like a behind the back pass alley oop.
Right.
Like
You're right.
he was ball. Yeah. Like he was. Uh, Funny enough, if he'd sat game six with how the game went, it wouldn't have mattered. But that's chicken and egg thing. But no,
That's
he
interesting.
balled out on game six. Yeah.
Yeah. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was I just saying?
Oh, you were saying was told it was a 2 week injury. He comes back for game
Yes.
six, balls out game six. They're up by 30, goes
Yeah.
into
So I was
game
just
seven
answering
and
that
is
question.
looking great.
The doctors absolutely did tell him he shouldn't be playing, but he is the guy that has the power in that franchise, and he probably should. He probably should be the one making that call, and he probably had all the information he needed to make it. I don't know if it was the right call or the wrong call. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what information he had, but I can guarantee you. I can't guarantee you, but I'd be shocked if he wasn't the main person behind that decision.
Yeah, because what I mean, that's we bring this up all the time in sports, and the nerd analytics person in me, if you're a professional athlete listening, is get your money. I'm forgetting what handle he goes by now, but I think it was JP back in the day on Twitter. Had one of my favorite quotes and was just like, "There's a reason there are so many championship rings in pawn shops, right? Like championships are great, but they don't pay the bills." So the cold calculating economist in me is like, keep yourself healthy, take care of it. And recent players we've seen, Kawhi, in my opinion, being the biggest one, where, sat out and it looked like a negotiation tactic, but it seemed like he was legitimately angry with the Spurs for like an injury he sustained in the NBA Finals. And we've started seeing that story repeated. Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, possibly Tyrese. I mean, Tyrese is, we don't know when he's back. I mean, he's hoping for a Kobe story, right? He's hoping for a Kobe recovery, but I think the timeline's like a year. He might miss all of next season. So we have seen players get injured because, as you mentioned, the quality of play is so much higher, and then they rush back and come through it, and it's really hard to know who says what, and it's even really hard to know what you can tell someone. If you are someone that has played basketball your entire life, the odds that you make an NBA finals are just low. And one of my favorite stories in NBA history for a coach that is an all-time great that I'm going to give even more credit to is Don Nelson. This exact story happened with Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant got in, or not Durant, sorry, they're too similar, Brian. Dirk Nowitzki. Of course, I'm going to confuse him. Kevin Durant is the modern day Dirk Nowitzki. Did I save it? Sure, I think so. Dirk Nowitzki under Don Nelson gets injured in the NBA playoffs, and they want him to play. Dirk, of course, wants to play, and Don Nelson's like, "You're going to have a really long career." Absolutely not. And of course, Dirk Nowitzki does go on to win MVP, Finals MVP, win a title. Don Nelson doesn't, though. Don Nelson doesn't win a title with the Mavericks and Dirk Nowitzki, but so much respect to that call. And that's so hard, though, to tell a young player, hey, in the middle of the playoff run, hey, you need to sit down because you may risk your health and also like the future of the franchise. And what I'm really starting to wonder might happen, Brian, is are savvy franchises, are we going to get to, almost like baseball load management kind of thing? I got a weird comparable. Uh, Clayton Kershaw, one of the greatest pitchers of all time, probably is like done, obviously. He's injured, he's at the end of his career, but 300 wins, a bunch of stuff, he's fine. But he in a season or two ago was close to was like on track to a perfect game. Perfect game is hard to get. For those that don't know what it is in baseball, it's basically saying you do not allow anybody to hit or get on base. And there's a no hitter, which is you don't let anybody hit, but they can get on base. So Clayton Kershaw, one of the few things he hasn't done in his career is a no hitter. He was on his way to a no hitter, but in baseball, they limit the number of pitches, and he was recovering. So he hit the number of pitches he was supposed to hit. The team was up. The coach pulled him, and people were booing, saying, you cost Clayton Kershaw his shot at a perfect game. And I'll even admit, Brian, the sports fan in me kind of agreed, but the Dodgers probably went. The Dodgers, the team that, as we're saying, was willing to spend money, right? The same ownership that's taken over the Lakers went, we're investing at the time, at least, we're investing tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars in you, Kershaw. Yeah, that's cool. How about we don't wreck our $20 million a year car for fun in a game we're winning and make sure you can win us some games in the playoffs? So that's what ended up happening there. And I'm wondering if we're going to start hitting that with basketball. And the savvy teams are the ones that do what players like Kawhi and Luka did and got really chastised for. If the smart teams are the ones that are going to be like, we shut them down and we know why.
Yeah, conventional wisdom in, all sports, I think, is generally, well, if a player is hurt and there's a borderline question, if it's the regular season, let's let them rest up. Let's see what we can do. And, maybe we can give them some extra rest. But then once we get to the playoffs, especially later on the playoffs, the finals, like it was for the Pacers, then it's time. It's time to go in. It's time to give every drop of gas in the tank there. I was using this analogy last week, empty the gas tank, right? Or last
Yeah.
show, rather. But because the idea is if you get injured, you have the whole off season to recover. But the Achilles is a special case. That's just the one injury in the modern NBA. Maybe the microfractured knee injury might still be in this category, but even an ACL nowadays is not a terrible injury. Players can make a full recovery from that. Making the full recovery from the Achilles and also the amount of time it takes is a lot harder. Kevin Durant obviously did it, and that's kind of an exception that proves the rule. And who knows, maybe in the last 3 to 5 years, when we don't have enough data, maybe these surgical techniques have gotten better. But my point is, I don't think that's true. I think Achilles are still considered to be the worst basketball injury. And we had, I want to say, 7 of them this year, which is the most ever. And the reason I know that is because Adam Silver got asked about it in his pre draft, segment that he does every year. He did not have a great answer for, I mean, he had a prepared answer for it. I just didn't like it. His answer was, oh, of course, I'm very concerned about these Achilles injuries. We have a blue ribbon panel already set up to look into it. And he named some potential issues, which are, of course, oh, the way AEU is handling them and the way, other people other than the NBA are doing it. Because obviously, we, the NBA, have no fault at how our players are getting hurt, right? So Silver gave a ridiculous answer to this Achilles question. And yeah, you're right. To be continued on this because Boston and Indiana, had incredible years this year, and now all of a sudden they're down in the dumps.
Well, I mean, we've even talked this before where we hear this load management comment come up. And I loved to the Adam Silver point. I want to say what Joe Dumars did like a study, sure, and said, "Hey, load management's overrated. You can play your players."
That's
Now we
right.
know why.
That's right.
We've mentioned this that it makes sense. NBA is entertainment. The product is the players. This is Dave Barry's research from Wages of Wins, where he basically says, hey, winning players are like what makes the world go around in the NBA. That's what people want to go see. And the NBA is a Pareto league. For those that don't know math, or it's a famous phrase, but like the Pareto principle is there are distributions where like 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. The NBA is one of these cases, right? I was looking at this for fun last year, Brian. It's actually awesome. Where if we're looking at the top win producers in the NBA, the metric we use around here, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, Josh Hart, Giannis, haha, went home early, but that's Doc Rivers' fault, and Tyrese Halliburton, right? Those players, Shea, Jokic, Hart, Halliburton, those 4 players all made the conference semifinals. And then, of course, Shea versus Tyrese, the finals. So I absolutely love that last year in the NBA, 4 of the top 5 players in the NBA, it was like a Final Four, right? If we're talking filling out brackets, if you filled out your bracket for the NBA playoff last year and went by top players and then crossed off Giannis because Doc Rivers was coaching him, you had the right answer, which I absolutely love. So the NBA is that kind of league. And so I noted and I said, and we see things like Tyrese Halliburton, who wants to play. So I said, look, the league clearly wants this, and the players clearly want it. So why are players getting load managed if those two don't? And the answer is teams that get it, right?
Yep.
One of the most famous, infamous, you want to call it, is the Spurs, who were probably one of the first teams on kind of the advanced analytics bandwagon. And I even have a fun article about this, which is you look at the Spurs with David Robinson and Tim Duncan, and the player I put in the middle was Shaq. So the article I said, hey, you look at the Spurs with David Robinson and you look at how they gave him minutes. And essentially, David Robinson balls out. He gets injured, which is why they get Tim Duncan, but it's still not great that he got injured. And then he's, not as great. Whereas you look at Shaq, they just played the wheels off of him. And Shaq was amazing when he was young, and he's still productive when he's older. But like Shaq, after a certain point, was not able to just play full minutes. And then you look at Tim Duncan, and the Spurs just followed the age curve with him and started limiting his minutes as he got older. And then, of course, the Spurs in later years, they would rest their older players on back-to-backs, which got them fined by the NBA. And the Spurs got it. They were like, wait a minute, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker are why we're winning titles. Why would we injure them needlessly for one extra regular season game when if we keep them healthy, they can legitimately have us be competing with LeBron James, which did happen. So that's my point on load management, and I'm just seeing it go one step further. That exact thing.
Well,
People
sorry,
are
just one
asking
thing on
Adam
that,
Silver.
Trey, before you go on. It's fascinating to me that it's the Spurs, right? It's Tim Duncan, famously the first low ego superstar, and Manu Ginobili, right? The first Hall of Famer to willingly go to the bench. So interesting it was those guys that had that innovation.
What is it? How am I dropping his name? Way back in the day, Finals MVP for the Celtics. But I think modern bench. You're
Oh, yeah,
absolutely right.
Dennis
Six man,
Johnson, right?
or not Dennis before Dennis Johnson. How am
Oh,
I? This is going to drive me insane. I'll look it up in the background. But no, you are right there too. Right where the Spurs were able to do it because they had players with the right attitude versus I think we could wind up in a situation where savvy front office teams might say, I could see, let's say the Celtics, because they seem to be pretty clever. I could see the Celtics saying, we will sign you. We will sign you to, a max contract. But by the way, you're going to make this agreement, right? You're going to make this agreement on how much you play. And if you don't agree to that, we do not let you like on the team.
interesting.
So that's just where I could see it going. So we shall see. But yeah, it's not great, and I don't have a good answer to it.
I have
And it
one
is
answer.
what
There
do you
are
got?
teams using wearables to collect data to try to say, is there something weird, with my physiological data that leads up to some catastrophic injury? So they're trying to rest players based on wearables.
You know what's funny? So I actually have this going. It's Havlicek, by the way, is the player I was
Oh,
looking
of
for. John
course.
Havlicek. But
Hondo.
that does not count because that's before, like,
Yeah.
I would say modern NBA, you're right. Like Manu Ginobili in the modern NBA, one of the first players that just like, sure, I'll be six man and leave money on the
It's a
table.
good analogy,
Uh,
though. They're both like Hall of Fame starters that went to the bench. Yeah, sure. I agree.
but but okay, so I've got a ring. I've got a wearable ring. I didn't like the watch. I went with the ring. I have the cheap version. I went for the Alex Caruso version. My friend went for the Josh Giddey version. I think Aura is the big brand. And he was telling me it's wild that these rings nowadays, so mine just does blood pressure and sleep. And if I'm exercising, I can ask it to check a little more. But he says his ring will actually tell him, hey, I think you're getting sick because it's that accurate. And so this wearable stuff, I could see that where you literally go up to a player and you're just like, hey, you're going to rest. And like, what are you talking about? And, I could see something where it's just like, yeah, we're noticing the white blood cell count or whatever on your right leg is too high.
Or even something
So
like
that,
you run at this average miles per hour and you're 3 miles per hour slower, something like that.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So not even as exact as I, yes, that, and I mean, that is, if done right, that is fascinating to me. And it's funny because I remember back in the day when the tracking data, the cameras, so there's a Spectrum does it. I forget if they've changed names or whatever, but it was Synergy at one point, Spectrum, and I don't know what they are now. But there are cameras above every NBA court that track all the movement. And if you have the right level of access, you can get access to this data. And it's what fuels like the play-by-play stuff at came out, people were kind of trying to figure out what to do with it. And there were papers at Sloan, the analytics conference that does a lot of basketball, put on by Daryl Morey, the general manager of the 76ers. I love it. Or yeah, I think he's still there. I don't know. But there was like a paper that was talking about like how many miles players ran in a game. And I even want to say John Hollinger, a well-known analyst, was like, this is one of the most interesting papers I've seen. I don't know what it means or what to do with it, right? Because it's somebody going, hey, we can track how many miles a player runs in a game. And we're box score people were like, and because one of Patrick Minton's first articles, one of my favorite articles, you and I quoted all the time, is the basket doesn't care how it got there. So, yeah, the
Yep.
basket doesn't care that Chet Holmgren got fouled on just barreling to the basket and put the ball through the hoop and made his free throw versus Nemhard makes like an amazing Steph Curry like three. They count the same. Basket doesn't care. So this paper that's talking about running, we're like, that is a metric. Who cares? What does that have to do with winning basketball games? But you're getting to the bigger thing where it's saying you could use that data to be like, hey, this weird point. You normally run right 3 miles a game or something. You only ran 2.8. Something's weird there. I like it, Brian. I like it.
Yeah, well, yeah, this is I know this is the hot take, right? That the eye test and the box score are not really that different, it's just a different way of looking at the same thing. I mean, that's kind of it, right? You can look at your players on tape and maybe they look tired. Like I was saying, I thought the Pacers looked tired in the third quarter of that game 7, but I don't know if they are, how fast are they actually running though? Maybe they look tired, but they're still running fast, so that data supplements the eye test quite a bit.
That's if you're doing it right. And I mean, what's funny is I even did that with like my chess. This is where it gets into chess analogy even more. Where if you're watching a chess game, it is kind of boring to go move by move. And in fact, in a standard chess game, a lot of moves in the opening, like everybody knows, you don't need to look at it. So you can look at a chart of the game and you go, oh, I want to look here. What happened there?
Right.
We just did that on this show with the game. And it, to be mean, validated what I was thinking, which is saying, in real time when I was watching the game when that happened, I was like, oh no, this is where they slipped. Then I was like, 9 points is too they can't, right? Like it's like OKC is too good for them to be able to come back. And then when I went and looked it up, it legitimately was, hey, TJ McConnell, who had been playing great, made two mistakes in a row. He forced it. And to your like tired point, you could maybe even go one step further with more data, with maybe even just watching the game or maybe even data, just be like, oh yeah, at this point, TJ McConnell ran out of gas because that was the discussion you and I were having real time, and then I was like, oh, Brian was right, where you were just like, yeah, they're up one at the half. I do not think they have enough left in the tank, and they didn't, which is a bummer. And there were signs in the box score. There are signs in the play-by-play. There are signs in if you watch the game tape off the play-by-play, and there's even more on top of that.
Right, because is it regression to the mean or is it actually fatigue? Right, those are two very different things. Well, so here's
And
I don't know if I've said this on the show before, Dre, but I always try to think of analogies when I'm trying to get my head around things. And here's how I look at this situation. If you're watching a game, it's like watching a movie in the theater on a film projector, right? And if you're a coach who does film breakdown, you could do something like go up to the projectors room and you know, make it go back and forth or slow it down and look at, each scene a little bit closer or pause it maybe. But we're looking at the box score is like it's like taking the reel of film out of the can and throwing it on the ground and cutting all the frames up and putting them side by side so you can see like the whole game at once, right? So it's just looking, yeah, it's looking at the same thing differently. That's my analogy.
Or if we want to stay what in like film land. So Ben Guest, if you're listening to this show, correct? Like that's like the storyboarding, like way back when you're starting the movie, right? Where you
It's
do that and you
storyboarding's a
put
little
like the
different.
story. That's
That's
like before it's, but you're
yeah,
saying almost, it's weird because almost it's like storyboarding a game when it's done, but also storyboarding it perfectly. Because a normal storyboard just is like, here's what's going to happen. It's broad strokes. And the box score is funny because it's broad strokes, but it's like exact. It tells you everything that happened.
yeah. The storyboard is mostly you have it's done on paper, written down how you're gonna try to shoot this film, right? And so the storyboard is a way to is an in between point where you can take what's written down and actually have it visualized. And so then when you're shooting the movie, you can have these storyboards and have this visual to say, ah, this is, you know, another way to look at how I want to shoot this. So it's in the same ballpark.
Yeah, I love all this. Yeah, and I mean that's I did like your point. You said like your hot take, your spicy take, that the eye test and the box score geeks are not antithetical to each other, and I do fundamentally
Well, no,
agree
I
with
go
that. Where
farther.
it's
The
go,
box score and the eye test are the same thing.
that is fascinating. What I will say is, I think that many people can use the eye test incorrectly. And it is hard. Well, actually, you know what, Brian? I think I agree. I was going to kind of try and disagree because what I was going to say is, I think it's harder to misuse the box score than the eye test. But we've seen EA points, right? The exact stuff, right? The rookie, what's his name? The person that just won Rookie of the Year that really depressed me on the Spurs. Uh,
Oh,
you know,
is it Stefan Castle or is he second
yes,
year
thank you,
player?
Castle. I did know it was like chess based. I was like Knight, whatever. Yeah, but just we still see we've seen
How about
people
Derek
do that.
Queen? By the way, Dre is in the league now.
Yeah. So and yeah, okay. Let's
Shout
see,
out to
Brian.
Sean
There's
Rooks.
two.
Shout out to Sean Rooks. Went to Arizona,
Okay,
played
so
for the Mavericks.
so here's the thing, Brian. We already mentioned this. We have too much to talk. I think I want to end on Kevin Durant, and we'll leave everything else to future. The finals was great to talk about. I may at some point have a longer form piece if I get time. There's so much going on right now, Brian, but I got to go see it with my son. As I mentioned, my cousin Patrick, like, you know, lived close by to walk us to the game, just really helped out. Huge shout out to the Pacers and their arena. It was the loudest game I have ever been to. It is a fantastic atmosphere, and they're also really neurodiverse sensitive. So they have calming stations and they had
Right.
headphones. My son didn't need a calming station, but he did need headphones because it was just that loud and they had them there. And actually, the food was pretty good. They have Ben's pretzels, which I was a big fan of. So, an amazing event. Brian, I got to get this on the air too. My aunt Leslie um, offered me a place to stay. And in return, I was like, hey, of course we'll come to see the game. I was debating if I was going to see the game. My friends are all terrible. You included. You're like, oh, you can see the game. Of course you got to see the game. I was like, yeah, it costs money, right? My aunt basically said, hey, I'll give you a place to crash, you and your kid. And I was like, okay, well that sells a lot, right? That almost pays for a quarter of the ticket. Um, so I offered her. I was like, hey, do you want to go to the game with us? I'll cover, of course. And then she said, I can't because Brian, Wicked, the stage musical was playing in Indiana the same
Oh,
night. And I've told her, and I'm saying this on air, she is legendary to me for that answer. Because there are very few answers that are justifiable. But I'm like, you know what? I'll give it to you. You got to see Wicked. And then her son and the funny follow up is her son Patrick got to go see the game with us because she was coming home from the airport and he said he couldn't pick her up because he wanted to see the Pacers in the finals. And Brian, the game that happened, though, to be fair, was game one of the NBA finals where the Pacers were losing for 99.99% of the game and won on the game winner. So it's a rough thing where I'm like, it's so rude you didn't pick up your mom from the airport. But if there was ever a game, if there was ever a game to miss it for, to just watch it on TV, that was it. And then he went to the game and we had a lot of fun. So huge shout outs to that. Like I said, might talk more. Last thing we wanted to talk that you and I have just been buzzing each other's ear off about is the Kevin Durant trade. Kevin Durant is finally on the move, Brian. He leaves Phoenix to go to Houston. Now, should Houston have made a start have made a trade for a star at the trade deadline? Probably. Now, to be fair, it's possible that they just couldn't get agreement with Jimmy Butler and the Warriors swooped in. Now, I am conflicted on this minorly, Brian, just very minorly, because Kevin Durant may be done, right? Kevin Durant may be past his prime. To your point on Kevin Durant recovering from his Achilles injuries, agreed that he came back as a productive player. But if you look at the games played, Kevin Durant was playing over 70 games in NBA season when he got injured with the Golden State Warriors. He was out a year, and when he got back, he has never played more than 55 games. And last season with Phoenix, he looked, it's a weird way of phrasing it, below average. Part of that is because he was playing as a power forward. So he was playing as a power forward. His shooting is still there, and also he was rough to start the season. This is a common thing I've noted, which is if you come back from injury, it is often the case that you have to ramp up a little. This is my point about why Joel Embiid was never an MVP caliber player like Nikola Jokic, is because Joel Embiid would play, get injured, come back. It would take him a while to get healthy, make it up to full strength, play, get injured, repeat. So Kevin Durant was kind of like that. He was missing games to start the season. It took him a while to come back. So Kevin Durant might not be that upper echelon, but Brian, there are a few factors. One, Kevin Durant was traded for bad players off Houston, and this part I absolutely love. This was the same thing that happened with the Jimmy Butler trade, which is the Houston Rockets are this how many wins? Like over 50? I can't remember how close, but you know what the
They were
two
the
or
number
three
two
seed
seed.
last season.
They're the number 2 seed,
Yeah,
so they might have had like 54, 55 wins. That's
52 wins. That it was
52.
such a
Okay,
weird season last season where how clumped the middle of the West was. But
that's right.
52
Everyone was
wins.
clumped at the end. The Lakers almost got it even.
But yeah, it was Dylan Brooks and who's the other player that went out for Durant.
Jalen Green.
So Dylan Brooks and Dalen Green are both overpaid, and not just overpaid, over like bad. That's the problem. Like wins produced, we run into things where I'm like, Jalen Brown on the Celtics is overpaid. But admittedly and agreeably, he can put up a performance to be Finals MVP worthy and is above average. So here's the problem. Kevin Durant might be overpaid at this point in his career, but he's still at least at the right position above average. Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green are sorry, they're bad. So like Jalen Green, I love this so much off already, Brian, is Jalen Green is scoring 21 points a game for the Houston Rockets. And he is doing that on, let me get the stat, the true shooting percentage. Why is it taking so long? 54.4% true shooting. That is egregious, which is weird. Older NBA, it's not. But in the modern NBA, completely unacceptable. So if you swap out that for Kevin Durant, who's like 60% plus true shooting, already that is amazing. Also, as I said, Kevin Durant was playing as a power forward for Phoenix. If Houston keeps a lot of their bigs, Houston's got some big players. They just re-signed Steven Adams. Kevin Durant's in a good match. So Houston, if all they did was get rid of two bad players, is already in a good spot. Kevin Durant might not be what he was, but he's still going to help them on the things they miss. And if Kevin Durant gives them that cachet, they might be able to attract another star, which might not have happened this season, right? It's possible that they might have gone to who are the big two names? Luka Doncic and Jimmy Butler are the two big names that went at the trade deadline. It's entirely possible. I mean, of course, Houston was courting Jimmy Butler. No one was courting Luka Doncic because no one knew. But it's possible Houston was trying to upgrade and no one was interested because it's been a while since Houston's been good. But I mean, Houston now, if they've got Kevin Durant, they just won 52 games. They're gonna get better, even if all Kevin Durant does is play like he did last season. So, Brian, I absolutely love this trade.
It's such a one-sided trade. I almost can't believe the Suns couldn't get more for Kevin Durant than they did. Now, there's some reporting on this. They were trying to send him to Minnesota for much, much bigger deal, but Durant said no. So Minnesota pulled the deal back. So they're screwed there. And then Durant said, well, I only want to go to three teams or something like that, right? The Texas teams and Miami, and that's it. I won't go anywhere else. So I guess Phoenix just said, okay, we're just going to ship you to Houston and be done with it and not take competing bids or anything like that or consider keeping him. So, yeah, I mean, maybe they backed themselves into a corner, but yeah, Phoenix is a nightmare. As far as the Rockets go, they kind of remind me of Oklahoma City last year in that they were one of the best teams and they're full of young players and they just got way better. So the situation they were in was they had all these young players, right, that they had drafted. Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Alperen Şengün, and they just paid Şengün and Green, right? And then Şengün actually takes off and does pretty well. We were debating if, those defensive metrics are right on him or not. It's not clear how good he actually is, but, for his age, he's looking pretty good. He has a lot of good stuff. Jabari Smith still on a low contract, fine. Jalen Green, though, he's the guy that got paid big money and just hasn't been good. Like you said, low efficiency, high volume, points per game guy that doesn't do much else. Not a guy we liked. And then Dylan Brooks and Fred Van Vliet were the veterans that came in right. Brooks, obviously, we don't like. He, he's good on defense, but so poor on offense. He's just one of the most negative win producers in the league, unfortunately. It's mean to say. He was a little better on the Rockets, but still not great. So for them to pick out the two guys that are making the most money and the worst players on their team,
Yeah.
and to move them on for Kevin Durant is wild good, and I can't pat them on the back enough for it. I would have I would have traded those two contracts. I would have dumped them for someone who's not Kevin Durant. Like I would have said, yeah, just get rid of those two guys so I could have some salary cap. But they actually got Kevin Durant, a Hall of Famer. It's amazing. Obviously, keeping Steven Adams is a tremendously smart move too. Having him and Şengün. They even have their first round pick last year, Reed Shepard, Jeff Shepard's son, the legend, who played a little in the playoffs and should, be part of the rotation more next year. And of course, Amen Thompson, the young superstar. To me, he should have been Defensive Player of the Year this year. He's clearly the favorite to be Defensive Player of the Year going into next year. This team is
I
so
mean,
loaded,
it's
Dre. So loaded.
let's point out if we're going to stay in tangent land briefly. That's the point I've made comparing baseball to basketball about awards of basketball just doesn't have enough. It would be more than acceptable for basketball to give an award to each conference, and that would solve a lot of things, right? Because then we could have Amen Thompson out west and what Evan Mobley out east, right? We could solve it that way. So I don't have any complaints that he hasn't, he didn't win it. It was deserving, although I think he might not have made the ballot, which might be the thing that's egregious, or like top three.
Yeah, just when you're
And
young, they don't give you credit for those veteran awards.
yeah, but agreed. And I mean, so here he's actually another fantastic point about next year, which is
Evan Mobley's not that
one,
old
they
either,
got
the more I think about it, though.
so who isn't?
Evan
Or
Mobley's not old either, though, so maybe my point's
yeah.
wrong.
But I mean, but no, Amen Thompson, he's a sophomore. It's
Oh, I see.
nothing, right?
Mobley's like fourth year or third year. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
For the Rockets next season, he's going to be a third year player and he's already amazing. So this team, this 52 win team dropped its bad players. Durant, even if he's average, like if Durant is average, which is what our numbers for last year would say as a small forward, he's average, but he's average in the way he needs to be. This is always really weird where I hate chemistry as an abstract concept in sports, but I love chemistry when it is used correctly, which is to say, like baseball or football, right? Like football, you go, hey, our team's got offense, but we're missing defense, so we're going to trade for a cornerback, right? Baseball, hey, we got hitting, but we don't have pitching, so we're going to trade for a reliever. Basketball, hey, we're giving all of these points to there are too many Jalen's. I'm definitely going to get the name wrong, but the Jalen they just traded for Durant, Jalen
Jalen Green,
Green.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we're a great team. We are a lockdown defensive squad. We are taking too many bad shots, and Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green are taking them. If we get rid of them and replace him with Kevin Durant, so it's there's this famous scene in the movie and book Moneyball where Jonah Hill's saying like, we just lost this great player that got this many hits and this many walks, and we're going to replace him. Imagine doing the alternative where he just goes, we just lost this player who gets this many outs. We're going to replace them with hits. And he got, this many caught stealings and we're going to replace him with it staying. That's what just happened, right? So that's I don't know if I'll have time to do that algebra, Brian, but looking at how many bad shots Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green were taking that are now off the table, and how many shots Kevin Durant takes that are now on the table, and the fact that Kevin Durant absolutely, with how this squad is constructed, is going to play smaller, right? Because as you mentioned, help me out with the Shengun, right? Or
Yeah,
Shen.
yeah.
Let me get the
Most
name.
people say Shengun. That's kind of how everyone in the media says it. I've heard some people say the real pronunciation is closer to Schengen, but I just say
Yeah, I'll
Shengun.
take you. Yeah, but basically, yeah, you have these players that are already big, and so Kevin Durant's going to be able to play as a small forward at least in role. He might still be listed as a power forward, but he's going to be a small forward in role. He's going to be shooting. And one other weird thing about star players that we've seen in past is sometimes a player, if they aren't happy, just aren't motivated to play. And so Kevin Durant, Phoenix wasn't making the playoffs last year. So how motivated was he to play his hardest? So if he goes to a playoff team in a better role, in a better position, what's he going to look like? So I am very excited to see what this looks like. And we need more good teams because I if the Denver Nuggets were willing to spend money, they could compete with the Thunder, but they won't. So I don't think they will. And another just random tie-up where you were talking about Kevin Durant saying no to Minnesota. That is also always the problem with trading a star, is if a star can veto a trade and you try and get commensurate value back for the star is going to say, wait a minute, you just gutted the squad you're trading me to. Why would I agree to that trade?
Yeah, and I missed something in my rundown. They also did re-sign the veteran point guard Fred VanVleet to a 2-year, $50 million deal. That's pretty team friendly for a veteran starting point guard, 25 million a year. So he's going to be coming back.
That's
And I will say, you're just saying what is this, starting lineup going to be now? I was curious. This is speculation, right? This is what ESPN says it is right now. But this is the lineup I would use. Van Vliet and Thompson in the backcourt, right? Durant at power forward, Şengün at center, Tari Eason as the starting small forward. He's ready to start. He was one of their best players off the bench last year. Did not get enough minutes, and like you said, he complements Durant perfectly. A defensive-minded forward to go with, the all-time great scoring forward Kevin Durant. That starting five could be the number one seed in the West, in my opinion, easily. Even
you know what's
OKC might not be that good.
what's wild about that starting five is just how big it is. Because you're
Yes.
putting Thompson in the backcourt. Van Vliet is a 6-0 point guard. And reminds me a lot of maybe Kyle Lowry back of old in for Houston. That is such a I mean, we love that squad, right? In terms of size. That's the
Speculatively,
Devin.
they might put Shepard at shooting guard, Thompson at small forward, keep Eason coming off the bench if they want to balance it out. But I'm sorry, keep going.
No, I mean, I love your point. This was a Devin Dignam point back in the day, which was play the tallest player at the shortest position you're allowed. So, right. The cheat code we had was Dennis Rodman, where Dennis Rodman could
Mm-hmm.
defend 1 through 5. But, routinely the Pistons at least were able to put him in at a small forward. The Bulls put him in at center, but of course the Bulls, their cheat code was actually the other thing is that because of Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, they had like 3, 6, 7 players that were playing in the backcourt. So it's like, yeah, they put Dennis Rodman at center, but that's because you've got Scottie Pippen as like a shooting guard, which now Amen Thompson. I mean, I don't know how much that lines up, but that feels right, right? That feels very Scottie Pippen-ish for Amen Thompson to be like a shooting guard, but like really tall and really, really long and can defend anybody.
Yeah, I've thought about who he reminds me of. It maybe he reminds me of Kawhi Leonard a little bit because like he's bigger. Like he can play for. He's not quite as big as Kawhi, but yeah, just super athletic defense first player that is starting to develop an efficient offensive game. So that's how I describe him. Super athletic, yeah. Defense first, such a superstar.
Love it. All right. So I'm going to give myself some homework for next show, which Ideal World will be in 2 weeks. Um, I'm going to say the Desmond Bain trade, which was listed as a star, was like a blockbuster trade. Frustratingly, I kind of agree because Desmond Bain is actually really good. It's very confusing because the Memphis Grizzlies gave up 2 good players for a bad player, but then they gave them to a team that's really bad. So even the improvement of Desmond Bain and Pope to Utah doesn't matter. You did tell me the draft was fascinating because you said there was a player that said they didn't want to go to Utah,
Yeah.
and Utah was like, okay, cool, cool story, bro. And I don't know, is he related to Champ Bailey by chance? Ace Bailey?
I don't
Shot in
think
the
so.
dark?
I doubt it. No,
Uh,
I mean, I'm rooting for him now because so he's got this weird agent that's not a licensed agent and has like a criminal background. So, and his agent just decides we're not going to interview with any teams at all. And he had this really weird pre-draft process. So, I like that he didn't play the game of the teams, but watch out for that agent. We'll see.
all right, so we'll see, but I'll leave that as homework because yeah, we talked. That was fun, Brian, to talk the finals. Fun to talk Durant. There's still a bunch more. I want to talk the Lakers. I want to talk that. We've got a little bit of time before the off season turns into nothing. So that has been the Box Score Geek Show. I'm going to call it Brian because we've been going for a while. I'm getting tired. It's bedtime. So glad to be back. So glad that was an amazing finals. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Hat tip to Indiana and Denver, former ABA teams, for giving OKC, the greatest regular season team of all time, a run for their money. Hats off to OKC for pulling it off. Really excited for Houston next year, and good on Kevin Durant for getting to a better spot. And we're not done. We still got more, Brian. This is like part 1 of 3, unless more stuff happens or we just forget. So anyway, you can find us everywhere podcasts are found. The Box Score Geek Show. Find numbers at boxscoregeeks.com. Find myself on most places as Nerd Numbers. Brian, are you on any social media or are you still just lurking blue sky?
Oh, I'm lurking. I'm lurking everywhere.
So Brian is go on Blue Sky and say cool basketball stuff. And if you see like a B Foster like it, that's Brian. All right, we will see you next week. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Brian.